Hi guys, welcome back to Devotion Training, Swift 5 Fundamentals for Beginners. This is part 9, which is on control flow. So let's dive in and have a look. Okay, so basically we're just looking at how code is read by the computer and basically the sort of order in which individual elements are called. So for example, like a real life example, like if you were to put your shoes on and then your socks, it wouldn't work in that order, so you have to put your socks on before your shoes. So let's look at this array example I did earlier. So we've got a blank array here, which is a string array. And if we try and access the first object before we've added any objects, we will get an error. So if I run that there, give it a second. Okay, so there, you can see there's an error there, index out of range. And all indexes will be out of range because there's nothing in the array yet. However, if we start to add a few objects, so I append some oranges, apples, bananas, pineapples, then access the array. We can see over here we've got apples, which is array at index number 1. So remember 0, 1, 2, 3. And this is why control flow is important, because it reads code from top to bottom and execute commands in that order. So because we tried to call it here, that caused an issue. When we added the items first, then we were able to access it. So let's say, for example, we wanted to create an array of numbers from 1 to 1,000. So we could do it like so. So we could write down literally every single number between 1 and 1,000, which would take quite a while. Or we could just add each digit. So add 1, add 2, add 3, skip a few, and then add 1,000. So those are two methods we could do it. Or the other way we could do it is to use a loop, which is an execute bit of code that's called a set number of times. You can define how many times it gets called. So if we look, for example, we'll look at the for loop for starters. So again, I'm going to create a new array, a new number array here, which is an array of integers. And if we print the count there, we can see that that's 0. And here we're going to put for number in 1 to 1,000. New number array append, so add the number there, and then print the number. So what this is going to do is this will get executed 1,000 times. There we go. And it logs all the numbers there. So for number, it doesn't have to be number. This is just the name for your variable that you want to call. It's basically an integer, so you can call this anything. So we can call this int number, as long as we reference it here and here as well. It should run fine the same way. Give that a minute to run. There we go, 1,000 times, and it calls it. And here you can, this could be 1,000, it could be 10,000. This will take a bit longer though. So however, whatever numbers you put here, it will call it that many times. So yeah, that's going to take a little while. And it doesn't always have to start from 1. It can start from, I'm going to start that from 5, for example. Let's do 5 to 10, make it a bit quicker. Once this finishes, let's just cancel that one again. It's going to run. Okay. There we go. I call it 6 times because it includes number 5 as well. So yeah, you can see that you can put 4, whatever row we like, between what. Let's go back to 1 and 1,000. 1 to 1,000. It will call the block that many times. So that's one way of adding objects to an array, or calling something over and over to say, for each iterance of, for each time this is called between 1 and 1,000, call this block of code, call this function. So we can look at the class members array. We did in an earlier episode on arrays. And you can just, this time I'm not going to add anything, I'm just going to print out the names of the class members. So this will run through, and I'll press and put 1 to 1,000. And it'll print out the names and the index of the class. So you've got the class member here. So this is another string iteration. So class member, and then we've got that backslash and the brackets to define which variable I would like. And I'm getting the object at index I. So this time, instead of using int num, I've used I. And instead of using 1,000, I've used from 0 to the number of objects in the array. So this has basically gone through each index within that array and then logged their name at the top, and then afterwards logged the class number string iteration here with the name, and also the index of that class member, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 6 objects. So these are the two ways you can do it. So you can do it for members in an array, or you can just create an array from 1 to 1,000 quite quickly with a for loop. And the other way we can do it, rather than putting the for int num or I in a range, you can say for member string in class member. So this will basically call it as many, it will look for strings in this array and then call it that many times. So this one has six strings in there, so it's going to call this loop 6 times. So if I run that there 6 times, it will just print out this string iteration instead, just saying class member, and then the backslash, the brackets, and then the variable member, which is mentioned there. So that's one way of doing things. We can do things in a for loop. Another way of doing things is in a while loop, and a while loop just basically continues until a condition becomes false. So this can be helpful to sort of show something's loading. So if you've got something that's being pulled from a backend or a website, that could take a little while, so you could show an activity indicator while doing that. Or in this case, we're just going to basically keep adding 1 to the variable I until it becomes 10. So this is saying while I is less than or equals to 10, keep going. And when it's gone over 10, it will just stop. It will just break the loop. So it calls it 10 times and then breaks the loop, so you can see there. So literally just keeps adding 1 until i's become too big, become more than 10. So I is now 11. And then that's from, so if I print out I at the bottom here, this is I. We run that. There we go. This is I, which is 11. So it's called the loop 10 times. It's added 1 10 times to 1 originally, and then we've ended up with 11. So there's also the while loop, and there's also a repeat while loop, which is basically it repeats while a condition is met. So the difference between a while loop and a repeat loop is that the repeat loop sort of evaluates a condition after executing statements from the loop. So the while checks again at the top, and the repeat checks again at the end. So the repeat, this gets called over, and then this gets checked at the end rather than at the start. So if we run this again, we can see that this gets called 9 times, and this is 10. And the reason for that is because this one is less than or greater to, and then this one is less than. So if you want to check a statement if the condition is met at the end, it's worth using a repeat while loop. Otherwise, it's worth using a while loop. So now if we look at if statements, I think we looked at if statements a little bit earlier. We looked at some other code. So if statements are just checking if something is, basically if a condition is true or not. And if it is, then you call a block of code. So in this case, if 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, the condition is true. So if we run that, we can see clearly the condition is true. And they're just quite helpful to use in code if you just want to check a variable that you set earlier, if it's still at the same value, or if a user's logged into an application, you can execute a bit of code. And you can also use an if-else statement. So if-else statement basically, rather than just having one option, it can say if, so for example here, we've got the variable which is weather, which says cold. So it says if the weather is sunny, print wear a t-shirt, else wear a jumper. So if the weather is equal to sunny, then it will call this block of code inside these curly brackets. And if the weather is not sunny, it will call this. So basically I can change this to anything but sunny, and it will come to this here. And if I change it to sunny, it will print out wear a t-shirt. So if-else statements can be extended as well. So you can just have many different outcomes, and you can carry this on as long as you like. So basically this one says if the weather is equal to sunny, wear a t-shirt. Then else if when it's raining, wear a raincoat. Else if, wear a jumper. And you can else if pretty much as much as you like. You could it just basically keeps jumping down and checking this condition here. If that's true, call that. If not, jump onto the next one. Then it checks if that's true. It will call that one, and if not, it will call this as sort of like a last resort if the other two conditions aren't met. So another way of using the if-else statements, if you've got quite a lot of different if-else statements, it's sometimes better to use a switch. And a switch basically is a quick way of writing an if-else statement. So here I've got this value here, which is known as horse, and the switch sum value basically will check each case, similar to an if statement like that, but rather than doing the variable equals equals, it would just check the variable itself. So here it says case horse eats grass, case wolf eats meat, default no match. So if I run that, you can see it prints out eats grass. And if I change this to wolf and run that again, it'll take a little while, we've got the two, eats meat. And if I change this to pig, there we go, we see it's no match. Right, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Bye.